Kwe makanakdoda, Pekorkan and Gingerba, Peter Bromegwan Dira, Gizagate and Okwe Indigenous Cause and Dalshoganashi, Nozwin, Lynn Gehl. Hi, Kwe. First, I'd like to, of course, acknowledge that we're on Algonquin traditional territory. I'd like to honor my Algonquin ancestors, my Mohawk ancestors, and of course also the Wendat people. It's my understanding that along their migration they walked this way. So I'm going to cover all the nations that I know of there. I'd like to also thank Indigenous People Solidarity Movement Ottawa for the feast and for all the work pulling this together, miigwech. So when Matt contacted me and he asked me to be a panel member, he asked me to talk about water, and he asked me to talk about the commodification of water. And I was thinking that, oh, well, I would talk about 5 different kinds of pollution, water pollution, and offer a model for people to think through. But I'm not going to do that. But I am going to talk about the water. So oftentimes what happens is you have to look around and see what's emergent and what is current, and you have to address that issue. That's a very traditional way of doing knowledge. One way to think about that is you talk about where your moccasins take you. And so I'm going to talk about Chaudière Falls, which is a really pressing issue, as we know. So my talk is 15 minutes. I've timed it twice, and I'm basically going to read it, which is very unlike me, but I am going to read it. Tomorrow I'm going to do a traditional talk from memory, and that is quite a different way of talking. So my talk is called Chaudière Falls Tells the Story of Crater's First Sacred Pipe. Canada's Parliament buildings, Prime Minister Stephen Harper's residence, the Governor-General's residence, and the entire National Capital Region reside in what is unceded Algonquin territory. As a result of this truth, a huge component of Canada's nation-building strategy has worked hard to deny, confound, and push out the existence of who the Algonquin Anishinaabe were and are. This strategy of denial has persisted for generations, and it continues today through the nonsense of the land claim process and the continued need to usurp Algonquin Anishinaabeg territory. The sophistication of Anishinaabeg stories and text is that they transcend what Europeans place on papers and in books. The Anishinaabe rely on the natural land and waterscapes to preserve our knowledge for future generations. Our migration story is inscribed in the landscape, where the 7 stopping grounds can easily be identified on our journey for the turtle-shaped island and where food grows on the water. Additional locations where our stories are inscribed consist of Dreamer's Rock in what is now Manitoulin Island, and the Sleeping Giant off of what is now known as the city of Thunder Bay, and the array of petrographs painted across on the rocks across what is now known as the Canadian Shield. Also, there are stories inscribed in the petroglyphs in the huge rock outcrop located north of what is now known as the city of Peterborough. In the Algonquin Anishinaabe tradition, places such as Mazenot Rock and Wesso Rock tell our creation story, where the 4 sacred elements of rock, water, wind, and fire first came together. These are the same elements that make up our sacred pipe. Further, resembling the phenomenon of human sight and the importance of a clear vision, the places where rivers or streams of knowledge intersect and where islands are located are special meeting grounds where Indigenous nations would gather. The area now referred to as Chaudière Falls is one such place. Located in the Gitchisipi, what is now called the Ottawa River, and where the Gatineau and Rideau rivers join between what is now known as the province of Quebec and Ontario. Chaudière Falls are located where the Great River constricts to its narrowest width, and where 3 islands are located just downstream, Chaudière, Albert, and Victoria. Undoubtedly, this place is sacred. I know this through the knowledge I carry as an Algonquin Anishinaabe-kwe. In pre-colonial times, Chaudière Falls held special features inscribed with great meaning for all Anishinaabeg. These features consisted of horseshoe falls in the shape of an almost perfect circle, representing a pipe bowl. an area where a great amount of water traveled into an underwater cavern or passage representing a pipe stem, where the constriction of the river represents the constriction where the pipe stem enters the pipe bowl. These features represent the first sacred pipe given to a great Anishinaabe philosopher, Wasakajak. Wasakajak was the son of the spirit of the west wind and Mother Earth's first woman, Winona. Wasakajak had many responsibilities during his time here on Earth, two of which were naming all the beings and bringing color to the earth. His footprints are still inscribed along the Ottawa River, and so we know he was here, and we know Chaudière Falls are inscribed with our story about the first sacred pipe intended to bring peace and friendship to the original peoples. While a doctoral candidate, in my time, in the time I spent with Grandfather William Commanda, he informed me that the falls are called Ikapuktik, which translates to Pipe Bowl Falls. Interestingly, the spiritual significance of Ikapuktik was recorded in June 14, 1613 in Champlain's journals, where he witnessed the Anishinaabe doing a ceremony offering tobacco to the pipe bowl. Champlain renamed them Chaudière Falls, where Chaudière translates to kettle or cauldron, hence the name today. While the splendor of Wasakajak's work was carefully inscribed into the waterscape for all future generations to remember and rely upon, and to offer their tobacco and prayers, all this changed with the coming of the white-faced people, their needs, and an economic paradigm that displaced Mother Earth, women, and a respect for natural law from the heart of who humans are and what humans do. Chaudière Falls knowledge holder Lindsay Lampard offers pertinent history that I rely on here. Canada has long considered the falls crown land, where in the late 1800s, Canada issued hydraulic leases so the water could be harnessed for industrial use. It was in 1908 when the various leaseholders constructed the ring dam over the entire span of the falls, where eventually E.B. Eddy took over sole operation for its pulp and paper mill production. And in 1997, the Domtar Corporation bought E.B. Eddy and ran the mills until they closed in 2007. According to Lampard, when Domtar closed, the federal government should have voided the industrial leases and determined what would be best for the greater public. Instead, in 2012, the federal government quietly transferred Domtar's interest to Energy Ottawa, a municipally owned power company, which in turn intends to retrofit the ring dam for additional hydroelectric generation. At the time, the National Capital Commission wanted to buy Domtar's assets, but the request for funding from the Treasury Board was denied. I'm thinking here that the Treasury Board may be a good ally for the Algonquin people, because it seems like they're not on terms with the government either. In terms of the three islands located just downstream, the National Capital Commission has jurisdiction over Victoria Island, where the other two, Chaudière and Albert, are co-owned by Canada and Domtar. Well, that's the colonial story. And Domtar now is in the process of selling their property to the Windmill Development Group for redevelopment with condominiums, a hotel, offices, and retail space for the fat cats. The federal government is supporting this process, and while at one time Ottawa did zone the islands for parks and open space, on October 8, 2014, the Ottawa City Council changed the zoning of the lands to downtown mixed use to permit this development. Both the Algonquin Anishinaabe and many settler people are opposed to the windmill developing the islands. They have been waiting for a long time for the industrial use of the falls and islands to end, desiring the area to be renaturalized. And in the 1980s, the National Capital Commission under Jean Piggott wanted to undam the falls and restore the islands as parkland. In 1998, Regional Chair Bob Chiarelli, along with the City of Ottawa politicians, also wanted to free the falls. In 2014, when the Ottawa City Council changed the zoning to downtown mixed use, Somerset Ward Councillor Diane Holmes objected with a dissenting vote. In terms of Indigenous opposition to the development, most people know by now that Algonquin Anishinaabe grandfather William Commanda had a special vision for the area. It was his vision that the sacredness of Pipe Bowl Falls be returned to its natural form, and the three islands be housed with several features such as a city park, a historic interpreter center, a peace building meeting site, and an Aboriginal center. Regardless, in a world where money trumps vision and the need for concrete reconciliation, the Windmill Development Group's plans are moving forward. Apparently tomorrow, they're moving forward. While Canada and Domtar may unilaterally assert ownership and jurisdiction to the area and the resources drawn from the land and resources, as per the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, this is in fact a violation of Indigenous people's rights. The entire area is unceded Algonquin land, meaning it remains under Algonquin jurisdiction, and where it may be in the developer's interest to argue that the Algonquin Anishinaabe are unable to get together, this is erroneous and ignorant thinking. The Algonquin were once a united nation. Despite this, in their need to build a country, the British assigned the provinces jurisdiction of so-called Crown land and the federal government jurisdiction of the Indians, effectively imposing a bureaucratic suffocation that continues with us today. What is worse is the Algonquins of Ontario currently have a land claim process imposed on them, a process that sets tight parameters around Indigenous people's rights that, as Russell Diabo argues, will assure our termination. What is more, the process is fraught with poor governance on the part of both the Algonquin and the governments of Canada, whereby as a result the process is nothing more than a 25-year-long job creation program for a handful of co-opted Algonquin men whose silence has been purchased in exchange for the paychecks, along with offices full of federal and provincial government employees whose ignorance has been purchased through their even bigger paychecks. A job creation project where lawyers make as much as $300 per hour. At the same time, many women and children are denied the basics of life. This is the disgusting truth of the land claims process. It is this very purchased silence of Algonquin so-called leaders that is confusing many Algonquin community members through the Indian Act, the residential school era, the settler land grant era that denied Indigenous people their own land, the criminalization of our culture. Many do not know the history of denial, what their Algonquin rights are, nor the economic manipulation of the land claim process that offers the Algonquins mere crumbs. Unfortunately, many Algonquin interpret the lack of so-called leaders speaking out as signifying that the process is a good process. Clearly, it is not. While this process of destruction of Pipe Bowl Falls and the imposition of the land claim process are incredibly offensive, the Windmill Development Corp tops their ignorance with the appropriation of the Anishinaabe-Moan word zibi, which translates to river, to name their development project. It is argued the word was chosen to honor the Algonquin. It appears it has not occurred to Windmill that it is the people who determine if they've been honored. I'm not feeling honored, and while the Algonquin leaders in Ontario's land claim process may have sold their tongue, Gitigan Zibi Algonquin Chief Gilbert Whiteduck of Quebec agrees that the word choice is an appropriation. Miigwech.